Well, we've made it to the 2022 to 2023 offseason, and as usual, there will be a lot of work to do. The good news is that we did a good job with our owner. Our record was improved. We brought in A.J. Pollock, who met his needs. We increased attendance significantly through our good play and cutting our ticket prices a bit. But we've got a lot of work to do for this upcoming season. Our new goals are to play close to 500 ball, which is where we were last year, so hopefully that's achievable. Improve our team on-base percentage. Sign Miguel Rojas, which, as we'll talk about, is a big issue, and then continue to increase our attendance on the way to reaching the World Series in the next few seasons. So definitely have some work to do. Positively, our good fiscal performance our good financial performance did get us to kind of continue increasing our budget. We were $77 million when we took over, $95 million for the season that we just completed, and we'll be at $106 million for next year. So that will give us more flexibility. And positively, we've got about $20 million for free agents right now, which will help us a lot. But getting to that Miguel Rojas issue that I just mentioned, he had an absolutely fantastic season for us this past season. Definitely is a leader on the team. Excellent defensive shortstop, and he had a really good year with the bat also this past year, hitting .328, which was second in the National League, OPS over 800, OPS plus of 126 in nearly 6 wins above replacement. So just a great season, and he did it for us at $5.5 million, which was a bargain for us. The issue now is that our owner, Bruce Sherman, has asked us to sign him to a long-term contract to keep him happy. And Mr. Rojas is looking for in the neighborhood of a 5-year contract at about $25 million a year, which we absolutely cannot afford. So we're going to probably have to let him go, upset the owner. From a financial responsibility standpoint, it's certainly the right thing to do. He's going to be 34 years old by the start of the next season, probably on the downturn. We've gotten the best years out of him for a great value, but it's still going to be a major hole in our lineup that we need to address in the offseason. The other big decision that we have is Carlos Carrasco, one of the two players we traded, one of the two starting pitchers we traded for before the trade deadline last year as we tried to make a push for the playoffs. We've got an option year for him for $14 million. He's probably a little bit above average of a starter. $14 million is obviously a number that's going to leave a big hole in our budget. So that is a critical decision that we will have to make. As we talked about in our last episode, he pitched reasonably well with us, 1.19 ERA plus in the 13 starts he made for us. So certainly did what we were hoping for down the stretch, but that will be a big decision for us to make. Catcher, we had potential problems, and they've kind of sorted themselves out. You'll remember that we signed Buster Posey and Austin Hedges as free agents in the past offseason, and they split time this past season with us behind the plate. Posey was actually the starter most of the time, and Hedges had been complaining to me that he was unhappy with his role, wanted to be traded. Posey ended up getting hurt in the middle of the summer, and Hedges stepped into the starting role in those few weeks. And after starting for a couple weeks, he actually approached us and said, "Hey, I love playing with you guys. I'd like to sign an extension." So even though we still had Posey under contract for another 2 seasons, we figured, well, Hedges is a fantastic defensive catcher. Let's get him locked up. So we did, and we signed him to an extension for $1.3 million this coming season, $1.4 million in 24, and then we've got a team option for 2025 at $1.5 million. So we've got a great defensive catcher under control. The concern was, though, that when we got to next season and Posey was starting more often than Hedges, that he'd be complaining and unhappy and asking us for a trade again. But with the end of the season that just happened, the problem resolved itself a bit, and that Posey retired. So that prevents the issue from the two of them fighting over playing time from manifesting itself, but obviously means that we'll need to bring up another catcher from the minors, or perhaps sign someone as a free agent to either back up or start in front of Hedges, depending on who we have, who we can find that's available. Posey had a nice season for us in his last major league season. You can see only ended up starting 71 games because of the injuries. Batted .301 with an OPS plus of 106, WAR of 1.6. Solid season. Certainly not the type of season that Buster Posey put up at the beginning of his career when it looked like he was going to be a future Hall of Famer. But certainly for the $2.5 million we had paid him last season, it was good value for us. The last thing to mention before we take a break and start getting into figuring out our salary arbitration, which contracts we're going to extend, whether we're going to exercise the team options, is just that we had such a good financial performance last season that we did make a few changes to our personnel. You can see here that for last year we ended up with a profit of $29.5 million, driven by us not spending as much as we had thought we would on salaries by just not being able to sign the free agents we had hoped. And then also us increasing our revenue significantly in terms of the gate. You can see there over $10 million increase in gate revenue, increased season ticket revenue by a couple $1 million, which was really positive. And then the result of those more people and more interest in the team was more merchandising revenue. So we had a good financial performance last year, and we used that to kind of make some personnel changes. We actually brought on a new hitting coach, Joey DeMonte, brought on a new third base coach, David Freese, that we think are better than the guys we had before. So we paid out the last year or two of their contracts. And then we did the same thing with our scouting director and our team trainer. We had pretty good people in those positions. Legendary. Scouting the major leagues, minor leagues, international scouting, and amateurs. When I saw that he was available, kind of have to pull the trigger if you have an opportunity to bring someone like that onto your team. And then team trainer with Rick Jameson, we also updated significantly. Excellent or good at just about everything, and legendary in preventing arm injuries. Obviously critical for a team like us that's going to be focused on pitching, and outstanding in preventing leg injuries and also fatigue recovery. So we used a little bit of the money we had built up to buy some personnel out of their contracts and hopefully upgrade our staff for the next several years. So those were the immediate changes we made. We will now start digging into our decisions around the roster and kind of preparing ourselves for free agency. Who do we want to sign in arbitration? Who do we want to pass on? Who do we want to potentially trade in the next few weeks? We're probably going to submit a $18.9 million qualifying offer to Rojas. Odds are he's not going to take it. As I mentioned, he's looking for $125 million over 5 years, but that will at the very least give us draft pick compensation if and when he does sign with another franchise. So, and if he comes back to us for $18.9 million, it's probably a decent price for him next year, and we're not making a long-term commitment, but I doubt he'll do that. So we're going to dig in, work on the arbitration, figure out who we want to make offers to, perhaps make some trades, and give some more thought about what we want this team to look like as we head into the 2023 season and our push to get above 500 and hopefully make the playoffs in the next couple of seasons. Well, we've made it through salary arbitration and the free agent filings, and the good news is we've got over $41 million to spend on bolstering our roster. but we have a lot of roster holes to fill at this point. Our pitching is actually decent. Would obviously love to add a frontline starter, but probably not going to have the money to do that. But if we can add a solid, competent starter at some point during the offseason, that would be a logical place for us to go. Got a lot more work to do on our offense and defense. We need a backup catcher and or potentially even someone to start over Hedges, although given his great defensive skill, we'll probably stick with him as the starter and just look for another good defensive catcher to back him up. Could probably use some help at first base. We definitely need a shortstop, and we absolutely need a big bat in the outfield, preferably in center field. So there's some work for us to do. We did pick up Trey Mancini in a trade of a middle reliever, so that gives us a decent outfield bat for the next season. Other than that, though, haven't done too much with trading away guys that weren't in our long-term plans. Looking at the guys who are available on free agency, we do have a few options ahead of us. A lot of real good starters out there, but they're probably going to be too expensive for us. But as we were hoping with last season, if, a DeGrom, a Scherzer, a Musgrove, a Paxton, even a Bassett, Clevenger, Morton, Jimmy Nelson, even Jameson Talon, if any of those kind of guys who are looking for pretty big money now get to February and March and are looking for a contract, we may be able to do something there. You can see we did decide to let Carlos Carrasco go rather than pick up his one-year option for $14 million. So that should tell you that we're looking, if we do sign one of these medium to high-end starters, that we're hopefully looking to do it for less than $14 million, and there are options there. So we'll see what happens on that front. Looking at catcher, couple interesting options. Mike Zunino, Austin Barnes, Tucker Barnhart, all pretty solid defensively. Zunino's looking for $11 million right now, so that's not realistic, but Barnes or Barnhart could end up being who we end up pairing with Hedges at catcher. So I think we should be able to resolve that position relatively cheaply in free agency. On the first base side, there's some big names out there with Jose Abreu, Max Muncy, Will Myers, and Jock Peterson, who could also fit in as a corner outfielder, Josh Bell. So there's some options there, but with the exception of Bell, they're pretty expensive. Garrett Cooper, who we did not make an offer to in arbitration and couldn't really find a good trade, is an option to bring back. We were going to offer him about $2.6 million in arbitration. He wanted about $3.5 million. You can see he's requesting $1.2 million now. So fallback is to potentially bring him back at a lower price, but we'd like to upgrade that position. Shortstop, you can see some real good high-end talent out there with Bogarts, Gregorius, and Rojas, who we used to have. As I mentioned, Rojas is looking for $25 million for 5 years, so that's probably not going to work for us. Realistically, we're probably going to go for a good field kind of hit player. A Brendan Crawford or Freddie Galvez may end up being the direction we end up going to get a decent defensive shortstop who can give us a little bit of offense. And then kind of thinking about the outfield, there's a lot of options here. Aaron Judge is the cream of the crop, but asking for a lot of money and very injury prone. You can see in his last 2 seasons since we started simming, real strong year last year with 45 homers, over 100 ribbies, 127 OPS plus, and over 4 WAR. That's the healthy, good Aaron Judge. 2021 with the Yankees when he was injured, only played 33 games, OPS plus of 93, and a WAR barely over replacement level. That's the negative option, so certainly not going to be looking to spend $20-some-odd million for that level of unpredictability given our budget. Potentially interested in Michael Conforto here. Good bat, solid contact, good power. Had a nice season last year, even though the OPS plus was only 101 for a team like ours. An OPS plus of 101 and an on-base percentage of 324 is sadly moving in the right direction. So depending on what he ends up looking for and what our new scout says when we scout him a little bit more deeply, he's an option. And then still at center field, Manuel Margot, Anthony Alford, Jackie Bradley Jr., even Albert Almora Jr. are all potential options to bring on depending on how things evolve over the coming weeks and months of free agency. So we will see where we end up when we get to the end of spring training, but those are the areas we think we need to focus on now, and we'll see how economically we can pursue improving our team over the next few months of the sim. Well, it's been a relatively productive off-season for us so far. We're at the end of January 2023 getting ready for the season, but the good news is that we've been much more active than we were in the previous off-season, and I think we've made some good strides to improve our team. The big off-season signing was Michael Conforto, who's going to go right into right field for us. I think the contract is a stretch for a smaller market team like ours, but 12 to 12.5 million over the next 6 years with a player option for the final season. So we've got him locked up through his mid-30s. Historically, even though he had a bit of an off-season last year, has generated a 128 OPS plus, over 800 OPS, a 250 hitter with a 350 on base percentage and good power. So he will immediately slot in as the best hitter in our lineup and hopefully help our offense, which has been one of the worst in the league both of the seasons that I've been the GM here. We added 2 guys to play shortstop. We did end up losing Miguel Rojas. He did sign a contract for over $20 million a year for several seasons with the Phillies, so we will be getting a first-round supplemental pick as compensation, which is going to be helpful. Signed Freddie Galvez to play for us. Primarily a shortstop, good defensively, but he's also very adaptable, so we may try to train him up a little bit to play some second base. A little bit of a below-average hitter, but we were looking primarily for defense in the spot and to also spend a lot less than we would have needed on Rojas. And we also signed the veteran Brendan Crawford, a similar hitting profile, a little below average as a hitter. Solid defensive shortstop. So between the two of them and Jazz Chisholm, who's been our second baseman for the past couple seasons, young player, hopefully between Crawford, Galvez, and Chisholm, we have the middle infield positions covered with acceptable offense and good defense. Also added Jameson to a 1-year contract. It all depends on whether he stays healthy. He's fragile. He's got a long injury history. Is a good leader with a high work ethic, has 4 solid pitches. If he's healthy for us, it will be a good move. You can see over the course of his career, he's generated a FIP minus of 92 and ERA plus of 101. If we get solid, slightly above average pitching from him and he can go out and do 25 plus starts for us without a major injury, that'll be a good investment for us for 1 season. And then we also added the top-notch reliever Chad Green to a 2-year contract at $5.75 million for each of the next 2 seasons. He'll probably step into our closer role, definitely be a big arm in the bullpen. But we've made some progress, and we still have over $12 million to spend. Fan interest is a little higher after a couple of the popular signings, Talon and Conforto among them. The other move that we made was we also signed Tucker Barnhart to a minor league contract that will turn into a major league contract if he's on the team. Our expectation is that he will be on the team. Good defensive catcher, mediocre hitter, but between him and Austin Hedges. I feel like we've got excellent defense at catcher, one lefty hitter, one righty hitter. We're in a good position with our catchers heading into the 2023 season. So with that, we've got a little more work to do before we get ready for the season, but that's the end of this update. Thanks everyone for listening, and when we come back, we will be in the middle of the 2023 season and let you know how it's going. Thanks for listening.